Welcome back to Books and Beer. We're back at Green Bus after a certain amount of time we have spent away. We're so happy to be back.
Very happy.
Why? Because they asked us, what do we want to drink? And we said, watermelon wheat, please.
Watermelon wheat, please.
And that is what we got. It's so pink. It is delicious. It is absolutely refreshing.
Oh, so refreshing.
I think you were super ready for this.
I was very ready for this. I love watermelon drinks, and I love wearing pink.
Ah!
And this just gave me such a great chance to break our dress code, and
Excellent.
It was delightful.
Excellent. I'm going to kick us off because I actually have a watermelon book.
Excellent.
If you do type watermelon into our cataloging system, by the way, the sheer amount of watermelon titles we have would astound. I narrowed it down to Will There Be Watermelons on Mars by Debbie Manber, Kupfer. I said it right.
Yes,
yes!
That practice paid off.
I know, right? It's a series of 3 short stories. The first one actually came from a different compilation called Faux-pocalypse.
Ooh, I love that title.
I know. The premise of it was, what if there is supposed to be this apocalypse, but you wake up and the next morning the apocalypse didn't happen?
I love that.
I want to find this compilation. But the first story is based on that. It is this woman named Susie. She lives in Jerusalem. She wakes up expecting the world to have ended.
Okay.
But it didn't.
Okay.
And she's hungry and thirsty and very hungover, so she opens her fridge, and the only thing in her fridge are about 10 watermelons and several bottles of vodka.
Okay.
Which explains the hangover. Yeah. She has no idea where the watermelons came from.
Oh.
And at that point, it doesn't even really matter. She goes on to talk about how this apocalypse was supposed to happen and everyone was flocking to Jerusalem because apparently it was foretold that Jerusalem was going to be the only place that survives. So Jerusalem at this point is just teeming with people.
Okay.
And it kind of goes about the morning of what happens the morning after the apocalypse didn't happen.
Okay.
The second and third stories in this compilation build on that. They weren't part of Faux-pocalypse, but the author wanted to revisit the stories and see what she could build on.
Right.
So the second story, in my opinion, is kind of a filler story to get from one topic to another. It's Susie and her partner making their way out of town because Susie wants to know, what does the rest of the world look like? Okay. Are we in Jerusalem still because Jerusalem was the place that was supposed to be safe?
But it's still kind of like the iceberg lettuce of the story.
Yes. And they end up getting to a smaller town outside of Jerusalem, and they meet a woman named Naim who, upon first meeting them, says, you know, I don't have any fresh water, but would you like some watermelons? And Susie's still kind of just like holding her head like, no, I don't want
get away from it.
Anyway, the third story I really liked. It talks about the dynamic between a relationship with one Arab person and one Jewish person, how they were ostracized from their families. It's Naim and her partner. Ostracized from their families and their communities, and they decide, upon hearing about a program about pioneers on Mars, to become part of that project.
Nothing like desperation to make you try something great. Right,
so they end up moving to Mars, and they actually end up having the first child on Mars. So they spawn the first Martian.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Huh. And as a reward for spawning the first Martian, the government or project governing body was like, yes, you are the agriculture person on this planet, on this project. It is the entire reason you're here. Would you like to plant something in particular to celebrate this? She's like, I have a watermelon seed. And despite the fact that watermelons take so much resources to actually grow, they were like, yes, you may plant a watermelon. And so it comes full circles because they plant a watermelon on Mars.
Yay!
Yay, watermelon!
It's like they said the name of the movie in the movie.
I know! I'm going to have another book like this in a minute, but I would like to hear what you have going on, Mr. Sunglasses McGee.
Okay. Well, this drink we have here today, watermelon wheat, is a delightful, creamy, light, summery beverage.
Yes.
Has the delightfully fruity taste of watermelon, which itself is a summer staple.
Yes.
And so I wanted my picks today to also reflect that time of year. It's a magical time, a time of freedom from school, a time of popsicles melting all over your hand, a time of jumping in whatever body of water gives you respite from this all-consuming heat.
Oh, the heat!
And, you know, we are here in Green Bus, and nothing says summer like classical literature.
Ah, yes.
So my first pick here is I have Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. You see, Heather, I was bumming around on YouTube a while back, and I saw a trailer for a film adaptation of this made by none other than A24, of which I am a big fan. I saw it and I thought, hey, that's that thing I pretended to read in college.
Didn't we
Wow,
all?
yeah, wow. Now that A24 is making it, I'm a lot more interested.
There you go.
So, for those of you who don't remember the story, I certainly didn't, it's a story about possibly the rudest dinner guest of all time.
No?
It's New Year's Eve in Camelot, everybody's having a great time, when all of a sudden, apropos of nothing, this jolly green giant-looking creep barges in to the castle and demands somebody fight him. And he even pulls the whole, tell you what, I'll let you have the first hit, come on, it's free. And at first, King Arthur gets all righteous and it's like, you do not come into my house and do that to my guests. I'm going to take that swing. But then his nephew, this scrawny little puke named Gawain, is like, hey, don't dirty your hands with this. I got it. I'm going to save your honor. And so he takes the swing, lobs the green giant's head clean off.
Jeez.
But then old Green Eggs and Ham pulls the Monty Python stunt and just picks his head right back up like it's just a flesh wound. And he says, tell you what, since you did that, in a year, find me so I can pay you back for it.
Oh.
And just leaves. But it turns out Gawain is just so honorable, he just does it. A year later, he travels through England, starving, climbing sheer cliffs, fighting wild animals, all so he can go and get his head lopped off by Gandalf the Green.
Sure.
So anyway, yeah. Oh, the power of youth.
The power of youth.
So a lot of stuff happens, mostly in a castle where he meets three other weird figures. Turns out in the end it was all a prank to try and scare Queen Guinevere from a plan by Morgan Le Fay. So, you know, in-laws, am I right? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba. Coming to Fox this summer. So we have plenty of copies of this in the system. But before you get it, make sure you can find a good translation because nothing will make you feel worse about knowing your own language like reading how people used to speak it.
Yeah, it's the worst.
An English major, I am not.
Excellent. Well,
It's kind of fun to revisit.
I have no idea how I'm going to follow that up with other than turning super southern, y'all. I found some southern fiction by T.I. Lowe and called Under the Magnolias, set in Magnolia, South Carolina.
I love Magnolias.
Yeah,
My favorite tree.
I do. They smell so nice when you're walking through the neighborhood. Not in this heat. It's the story of Austin Foster when she's around like 13 or 14 years old. It's a coming-of-age story.
Okay.
Warning.
Okay.
Her mother dies giving birth to some of her younger siblings, and all of a sudden, she's inherited essentially the mantle of being mother to her 6 siblings. And having to take care of her father, who she finds out over the course of her life, has a mental illness that is extremely debilitating at times.
Okay.
So she's all of a sudden at 13 years old becoming mom to the crew, and having decided that she's going to hide her father's mental illness from everyone, which is an issue because he is a minister of their church.
Ooh, pillar of the community.
Pillar of the community. Interestingly, though, this church, they make a point of saying there's a First Methodist, a First Baptist, a First Church of everything. Their church is called the First Riffraff of Magnolia because it is a small church on their tobacco farm that is essentially a legacy church. So this farmer is the minister, his dad was the minister, their grandfather was the minister, and so on. But it attracts people from all walks of life, which is why it's considered lowly in its own way.
I'd go to that church.
I think I would too, based on some of these people.
Yeah.
The chapters are set up based on how they meet each of these people who become part of the congregation and as it goes along, part of this farm family. Eventually, around the time she turns 21, 22, so long time period, she's acting as mom and caregiver. Her dad does some stuff that can't be covered up, and finally the congregation was like, if you had told us, we would have helped you, obviously.
All I had to do was say so.
All you had to do was speak up. It's an interesting book. This came out in May. I was actually very happy to find it on Hoopla.
Like this year, 2021?
Like 2 months ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's a very quick read. I got hooked. I did it in 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah. It's on order at the library, so there's already a waiting list of some variety. This is a pretty well-known author for this genre, Southern fiction, Christian fiction.
Mm-hmm.
May float your boat, may not. Whatever. But she has a lot of other works that I think I might have to go back and revisit after reading this one.
All right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Gave me the good old summer feels until I got into some of the content. I was just like, oh, this is really heavy.
Yeah.
Whew.
Well, speaking of Southern fiction, I too happen to have a Southern fiction book right here. So next on the docket of summer staples, we have The Family Road Trip, or more specifically, Family Strife.
Oh.
So this book is called Blue Marlin by Lee Smith, and it is one of my favorite reads that I picked up since working at the library. It is a semi-autobiographical tale of the author's kind of tween years, and it mostly revolves around an infidelity.
Okay.
With her father that leads to quite an eventful year for her, and that culminates in a family road trip that they all take to try and get everything back on track down to Key West, Florida.
Okay.
I should mention this takes place in the 60s.
Oh, that's helpful.
It's and when they get there, they find out that there is a movie being filmed there starring none other than Cary Grant. And it is a lovely, lovely tale. And I want to say, first off, I have not even read any of Lee Smith's other works yet, but I love this woman. I want to take her to brunch and feed her Bloody Marys until she regales me with stories of when she was a go-go dancer for the all-girl rock band, the Virginia Wolves, which is something she actually did.
Oh.
And I'm not kidding, like, this book reads like catty gossip from After Hours Book Club in Savannah, Georgia. It's awesome.
That's the best kind of Southern fiction.
It's so great. She's so vivid with her frankness. I was constantly chuckling and thinking to myself, like, I've seen and heard my grandmother do this exact thing. Like, she says things like, neither my mother nor any of her friends would ever have acted like Carol Bird. In the first place, they all had constant help and never lifted a finger carrying anything. In the second place, Mama would not be found dead, dressed the way Carol Bird was dressed that day.
Oh, I must clutch my pearls.
It's so funny. It's so funny, so charming, and like it's actually very frank in a lot of ways you don't usually expect from Southern fiction as well. She mentions in one of the early chapters that she claims to have been in love with this woman with whom her father was cheating. Like seeing her from afar and just noticing how different she was from so many people she knew. And she doesn't go into too much more detail on her sexuality after that. But like I've looked her up since then, and just considering the literary scene she's a part of, it's just not something that I'm used to seeing. So hard to recommend on Blue Marlin here. Wonderful read.
Trying to figure
and a quick read too, by the way. Trying
to figure out a segue between like faux apocalypses and sexuality and Southern fiction. I'm just like, well, this one grabbed me because of the name.
A good name. A good name is always a hook.
Yeah, this one's called They Both Die at the End.
Oh yeah,
it's by Adam Silvera. It's actually extremely popular. There's a whole list for it, but you can find all of these actually on Hoopla right now. This book explores a world where something called Deathcast exists. It's kind of
sounds like a streaming service.
It's like a weather forecast, but it's like these people who work for a death service call you in between 12 and 3 in the morning, say, oh, by the way, you're going to die today.
Okay.
Live your last day to the fullest.
Okay.
Yeah.
That reminds me of like the suicide booths in Futurama.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Kind of. There is a whole culture that springs up around this. So supposedly it's founded around like 2010. So this came out in 2017. So it's kind of like a recent fictional world. Anyway, it's based in New York City with this one guy who gets the call, and he's like, how have I been living my life stuck in my room being afraid of everything? So he pulls up this app called Last Friend, And it is literally an app where you can either sign up as a person who is dying that day, or as a person who would like to befriend a person and hang out with a person who is dying that day.
All right.
And you basically just don't spend your last day alone.
Nice.
So he locates a person through this app named Rufus. Matteo is the guy who's afraid to leave his apartment. Rufus is the guy who is a very outgoing person who got in a fight that morning right as he got the call that he is also going to die that day.
Okay.
They find this friendship over the day. Matteo starts getting pushed to do stuff he would never do, and in the process, his true personality comes out.
Nice.
It's very interesting. It talks a little bit about family relationships and dynamics. It also talks about how history looks through a different lens. So one of Matteo's history assignments was to write a paper based on what a world event in the past would look like if deathcasts had been a thing. And one of the things that tipped me off to the time frame of this was actually, he was like, you could use 9/11 as an example. What would 9/11 have looked like if everyone had gotten a deathcast that call that morning? Yeah. Interesting read. I flew through this one as well. It's YA, so it's not a hard read. It does have some difficult content talking about grief and coming out to your family and a few other things. But I highly recommend this. It's a great book.
All right. Yeah. I can kind of think of a segue to that. So this next one that I have is non-YA. It's juvenile, but it does deal with a few more uncomfortable aspects of youth. So the last thing that we're going to get to today on our journey through the hallmarks of summer is a true cornerstone, summer camp.
Excellent.
As told through Be Prepared by Vera Brosgol. Now, Heather, did you ever go to summer camp?
A whole once, but it was only a week long, and I got to go home at night.
Okay.
So it wasn't real summer camp.
All right.
It was like academic camp.
Okay. I think that still counts. Well, I did not.
Okay.
And after reading this, I feel, as Dashboard Confessional might say, vindicated! Seriously, the very first page of this, like before you even get to the title page, is a Xeroxed letter that she wrote to her mom that says, let's see, "Dear Mom, could you pick me up as soon as you get this? Please, I'm desperate." And this is yet another semi-autobiographical tale by the author. It takes place one summer when she is 9. And our author, Vera, is from a poor Russian family, and she is enamored with like the birthday parties that her middle-class American friends throw, but she just doesn't seem to fit in because everybody's kind of uncomfortable with both her heritage and her economic level. I've lived in America my whole life, can confirm, that's our bad. So she finds out about this camp specifically for Russian kids, and she thinks that that's her ticket, you know, like she'll make more friends, maybe she'll come into herself, but she gets there and she hates it. And what's so great about all of that is that it just made me feel so good about that. Like I could step in and say, hey, hold on, no video games, no candy, and I have to poop in a hole. Like, I'm good. Okay, keep your knot tying badge. I'm going to stay home and get my gym badges in Pokemon Emerald like God intended. But really, the art is beautiful. It's colored so well, but the color is mostly this sickly greenish color that gives me the like the impression of like puke and grime and algae all at the same time, which I think is very intentional. But it's a really cute read, very funny, and I cannot recommend it enough. Hard recommend for like just a vicarious experience of it while you just stay at home with your DS. It's great.
And on that gentle note, go ahead and get on the holds list for some of these books. Go check them out. All great reads. I'm going to have to look up Be Prepared based on that description. Thank you to Green Bus. We'll be back, I think, next episode as well. Super excited. And if you haven't already, go like the YouTube page for the library, and we'll see you next time.